We had some technical difficulties in logging and connecting today, but I think we're all on and we're off to the races. So while we just make sure that everybody's logged in, I just wanted to share with you that we are taking strategic action to advance diversity and inclusion in the workplace with a first of its kind industry-wide survey on diversity and inclusion. IABC chapters across Canada, together with the Canadian Public Relations Society and the Canadian Council of Public Relation Firms, have sponsored a survey for members and non-members. This survey, you may have seen in our recent alert, has come out, should just take 15 minutes to complete, and responses are due by this Friday. So the survey is being administered by our research partner, Léger Marketing, and was developed in conjunction with Breakfast Culture, a marketing communications consultancy specializing in diversity and inclusion. So more information on this can be found at toronto.iabc.com, but we would sincerely appreciate it if you could take a few minutes, if you've received this, to complete it by Friday. Just for accessibility, if anybody on this call is in, if you require at this session an alternative format for accessibility reasons, please contact the IABC office at toronto-info@iabc.to. So before we dive into what I know will be an excellent webinar, I wanted to say that IABC Toronto acknowledges the land we're hosting this virtual session from is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse nations, Inuit and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So we're in for a great webinar this afternoon, in which we'll hear from three very well-respected Toronto communicators who are past winners and or judges of the IABC Toronto Ovation Awards. Feel free to tweet live and follow along using the hashtag IABC Toronto. Don't forget to tag our speakers. We'll add this to the chat to help you reference it through the session. We have Cyrus Mavawala, Sylvia Link, and Crystal Moss. We're running today's session as a Zoom webinar, so hopefully you'll be able to see and hear all of us on screen today. I encourage you to please let us know if you have any questions by entering them into the chat on the Zoom, and please remember to share them with all attendees. We'll do our best to address them throughout the session, and we have some time at the end as well. So this year, just before we kick it off, just some background. We made changes to better align. I'm just going to make sure that we are recording this session as well. Let me, for anybody who is... From
my screen, it looks like you are recording.
Yes, okay, perfect. Just thanks, Iris. We see your lovely picture on the screen. So this year, so everybody knows, we made changes to better align the IABC Toronto Ovation Awards program with IABC's Global Gold Quill Awards and the National Silver Leaf Awards program, making it easier for you to draft one entry for multiple awards. Additionally, 2020 saw world-changing developments at every turn. I think we can all attest to political shifts, waves of social change, and a global pandemic. And we've updated our awards platform to align to these shifts. So we have 4 new award categories: COVID-19 response and recovery, anti-racism, the LGBTQ2, and accessibility, and 2 new divisions. So we have communications research and communications training and education. So in response to feedback, the last new item is our previous People's Choice Award has been replaced with our Best of the Best Award. So this is to represent the very best seen in the Greater Toronto Area. There is no cost associated with this award, so it's more important than ever to score the highest mark on your submission. All right, so that's all the background. Now on to the fun and exciting information. To kick things off officially, I'd like to ask that each of our guest speakers take a few minutes to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with my co-judge for the Gold Quill Awards last year. I will hand things over to Sylvia Link.
Hi, great to be here this afternoon. My name is Sylvia Link. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications at RTO ERO. We're a member nonprofit organization. We've got 81,000 members across Canada. And so I'm delighted to be here representing the nonprofit sector And we're also delighted to be the nonprofit of the year last year for the Ovation Award. So that was pretty special for us. I've been an entrant for many years and also an evaluator at the Ovation and Gold Quill levels. And this year I'm on the IABC Awards Committee. So I will be putting in a plug for sure for the Gold Quill Awards as well. Thanks, Mandy.
All right, we'll head over to Sylvia. Oh, sorry, Crystal. Sorry, I'm looking at, thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Sylvia. I'm looking at Crystal. Thank you. Crystal?
Thank you, Sylvia. So my name is Crystal Moss. I'm with the Regional Municipality of York, and that's where I've come to judge for the last 3 years as part of the Ovation Awards, and we have enjoyed many recipients of awards as well, including year over year, York Region has won the Communications Department of the Year award. So together with a roster of communicators across the organization, we've had that pleasure and privilege. And I've been working in communications for 18 years, exclusively in the public sector at regional, municipal, and provincial levels as well. It's my pleasure to be here and to share with you some of the insights we've gleaned through the process of both winning awards and also judging awards.
Excellent. Thank you, Crystal. And last but not least, Cyrus, we can see your great picture.
Yeah, sorry about that, but I think it's much better that you guys see you guys versus me, so that's all right. I'm a founder of Advantis Communications. I'm a social media consultant, trainer, and speaker. And at Advantis, we work with municipalities, associations, and companies in the US and Canada to build their team's digital communication capacity through content strategy, creation, and activation. On the consulting side, we integrate strategic communication, social media, video strategies. And on the virtual training side, we offer university quality instruction on social media, how to present virtually, and much more. We've certainly earned awards and evaluated awards, and that includes kind of going way back to the early days of Gold Quill, where about 30 or 35 of us used to go down to San Francisco over a weekend and evaluate all 800 entries. So times have definitely changed, and it's great to see distributed blue ribbon platforms around the world. So happy to be here.
And we're very happy to have you, and happy to have all three of you. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. So I guess without further ado, I think things are over to you, Sylvia, to take us through the first section of our presentation today.
Great. Katie, can I ask you to put up the PowerPoint?
I thought it was showing, and I will make sure that it is.
It's our lovely smiling faces on the screen.
This is everything that we've been experiencing in the past 10 months,
Yeah.
is adapting to changing situations.
Yes.
Something that that communicators are really good at.
There we go. I see it coming up. There, it's there now.
Fantastic.
Katie,
Okay.
My bad. I thought it was up the whole time.
No, that's we have it now when we need it. What you see on the screen is the 7-point scale, IBC 7-point scale for global communication excellence. What's great, as Mandy mentioned, is that the Ovation Awards are completely aligned to this global standard. And that's great news for entrants, because it makes it very easy to share your great work across the different levels of awards. What this means is that the evaluation rubrics and the scoring is completely consistent. For each aspect of your work plan and your work sample, the evaluation is done based on this 7-point scale, and there are detailed rubrics to assist the evaluators in determining the score for that section. So here's my biggest tip to you. I'm sure many of you are already doing this. Go to the IABC website and download the rubrics. read them through, mark them up, get to know them, become friends with them, because that's really everything that you need to know to begin your planning. The um, the awards are really transparent in this way. The evaluation is completely transparent to you as an entrant. Everything you need to know is provided to you. Um, the evaluators work in pairs. There's always two evaluators who will look at your entry. Every round of evaluation, all the evaluators go through training so that they're reminded of the global standard, the rubrics, and how to do the scoring. So I just want to take a second to tell you how evaluators approach the scoring. We start with every new entrant, every new section of your work plan and sample. We start at a level 4. And you can see the description of that on the screen. In the past, if you've ever entered and you've received back a score in the range of 4, that's something to be proud of. That means that you've done work that is professional, competent, appropriate, and suitable for the purpose that it was intended. So that's where we start. We look at the rubrics, we look at the description for a 4. Then the score may move up. We look at the rubrics in levels 5, 6, and 7 to see whether the score can be moved up, whether there is evidence of that better than average and significantly better than average or outstanding work. As well, the score might be moved down if items are missing or inappropriate or incorrect. So that's really, it's not any more difficult than that. But what is important in understanding that is when you're doing your own entry, you want to make sure that you are including evidence of those things that will get you those higher scores, and that you are making sure to avoid any of the things that would detract points from your entry. You see right at the top, again, the score for award of merit, and this is consistent across the levels. Ovation, Silver Leaf, and Gold Quill. Award of merit requires a score of 5.25 to 5.74, and award of excellence is 5.75 and higher. So you don't need to know a lot of math to understand that you need to get scores in the 5s, 6s, and even 7s in different parts of your work plan and sample in order to be in the award categories. So that's why you're really wanting to look at what is that evidence that evaluators are looking for to give you those marks and those scores, and it's really all very plainly laid out. So let's take a look at the actual division. Oh, sorry, before that, if I can go to the next slide. Yeah, so we've provided some additional, IABC has provided some additional resources for you, especially in these times, if you need to justify the budget for entering into the Ovation Awards. There's a letter on the website that you can take a look at, you can use or adapt as you need to. The code of ethics is always a good thing. You can never read that too many times. Just to be reminded, again, of the standard to which we hold ourselves as professionals. The other thing I would encourage you to look at as you start your entries is the global standard for the communication profession. You will see in those 6 global standards a lot of alignment to the rubrics, and it will really start to make sense. It also is that great opportunity for professional reflection as you're doing your entry, to really reflect on the extent to which you're demonstrating the global standard of communication excellence. So now let's dive into the categories. There are 4 categories, as Mandy mentioned. 2 of them are new this year for Ovation. The first 3 categories, the first 3 divisions are judged, are scored 50% on the work plan and 50% on the work sample. And Division 4, which is communication skills, the scoring is skewed more towards the work sample because the emphasis there is on being able to showcase the creative tactics that are part of our work. So let's look at Division 1 in detail. As you can see, this is a big division, a lot of categories. This is where the majority of the entries normally fall into. I want to highlight, as Mandy did, the new category 14B, which is the COVID response and recovery management. No doubt there isn't a person on the call who hasn't been doing COVID communications. So it's a great opportunity to take a look and see out of that work that you've done, what you might want to submit in that category. As Mandy also talked about, category 17, diversity and inclusion, I really encourage all of us to reflect on what we've been doing in that area. There are a number of subcategories, and so it's a great opportunity to have peer review and peer feedback on the work that we're doing in that area. With these categories and any of the others, if you're not sure where your entry might fit, I will say evaluators work as diligently as they can to move an entry if it's in the wrong category to put it into the correct category, but it's always best if you've put it in the correct category to start with. So if you have any questions at all about whether something fits in a particular category, please reach out and ask. Let's move on to Division 2. Communication research. New this year for OVATION, but it's been part of the Gold Quill program for a long time. This is something that I really encourage everyone to look at and consider what you might enter in this division. If you are planning an entry in Division 1, then communication research is most likely part of the formative stages of your strategic planning for that big project. And so it's a great opportunity to reflect on whether you might pull out that research and enter it into Division 2. As someone who has both judged and received awards of Ovation, Silverleaf, and Gold Quill in communication research, it is really rewarding to reflect on this part of our professional practice. So chances are you already have that embedded in your entry for Division 1 and could pull it out and showcase that part of your great work and your great project. Moving on to Division 3, Communication Training and Education. Again, new this year, and a category that perhaps doesn't get as much love, doesn't get as many entries. I encourage you to have a look at your organization. Many organizations have internal contributors, staff contributors, who are, who we train in aspects of communication, or in the case of nonprofit organizations like mine, volunteers who we train in communications. So it's an opportunity to think about whether that's something that you're doing in your organization and to showcase it. And finally, Division 4, which is the skills. And again, you can see there are a variety of categories. My same key message applies. If you're entering in Division 1, then chances are there are elements of that larger project that you could showcase in Division 4. If you look at it, was there a special event, digital communications, or social media? There aren't many projects these days that don't have one or the other of those elements. Writing certainly is part of every communication project that we do. So I really encourage you to look for exemplary creative tactics that you've used in your larger campaign and showcase them here in Division 4. It's just an additional way of telling your story, documenting the great work that you've done, and getting feedback and possibly awards. So there is, when you look at one entry, you can possibly see how it can lead to a number of entries. And once you've done the bigger entry for Division 1, then entering into Division 4 is less work, there's less writing involved. And so it should be an easier sort of hill to climb to add a couple of entries into Division 4 from a larger project. So at this point, Crystal is going to jump into our beloved work plans and give you a lot more tips and details.
Thanks, Sylvia. Okay, so the work plan, that 4-page document that can make or break your submission, sadly, but it's true and certainly quite a process. So for the newly acquainted, the work plan is essentially your communications plan distilled down into really the key strategic essentials. And I know what you're thinking. How can I summarize everything I did into just 4 pages? We know it's not easy. Crafting those 4 pages will take longer than you expect. So do set aside a couple of days to tackle that part. For divisions 1, 2, and 3, essentially everything except for the skills category, which Sylvia just went over, the work plan requires the following 6 components. The business need or opportunity, which is really the strategic why behind what you did for your organization. We also need to see the stakeholder analysis, what you know about your key audience, your goals and objectives, what you're trying to achieve and measure, your solution overview, what you did to achieve your objectives, implementation and challenges, which are the challenges you faced in implementing your plan and what you did to overcome them. And finally, measurement and evaluation, how you knew you were successful in achieving those measurable objectives. And we move on now to the business need, which is my favorite section, actually. Back at the beginning of my career, I used to think that excellent work is enough, that strong writing and beautiful design will speak for itself and the awards will just come. I've learned through my experience, both as a judge and as an award winner and somebody who has applied and not won those awards, that good work simply is not enough to win these awards in particular. And it all starts with the business need. It is perhaps the most underrated section in the work plan. As a judge, there's nothing better than reading a strong, aligned, and perfectly purposeful business need for one simple reason. It sets the rest of your application up for success. It also connects to the rest of the work plan with an invisible string, so to speak. So if you do get this part wrong, if the business need isn't strategically aligned to something meaningful for your organization, then it's highly unlikely that your submission will be an award-winning one, actually. Quite frankly, I've yet to score an OVATION submission at the award-winning level if the business need is poorly defined. It just makes it really difficult. A good business need includes a number of key elements, including insight into your organization and the communications environment, including but not limited to the organization's vision, mission, and values. It should also include a line of sight to the strategic approach and why it was necessary to pursue. Namely, what's the problem you're striving to solve, or what's the opportunity? These insights should be validated by research and key facts. Since becoming a judge and winning a few awards with my team, we now include a business need at the beginning of every communications plan we develop. It has transformed our thinking and sets us up for continued success with OVATIONs. So to truly land the business need, work it into every and each communications plan you develop at its infancy. It'll just set you up for success and make this whole process much easier. We're going to now shift over to the stakeholder analysis. So this section illustrates your understanding of your audience. This is another section that entrants often underestimate. Many tend to gloss over it, including only just the most basic of information. But award-winning submissions, on the other hand, segment their audiences and demonstrate an astute understanding of their attitudes, of their preferences, their demographics, and so on. This understanding is then applied to your strategies and tactics. And as a judge, we're looking for you to show you've taken the audience's needs and their wants and their preferences and opinions and behaviors into account. So the better you describe the audience, the higher your score will be. So both qualitative and quantitative insights have a place here. So pull from your knowledge and cite any relevant research in this section. Goals and objectives. So the OVATION Awards are designed to demonstrate your strategic value to your organization and to the profession. So to win, you'll need to show your strategic thinking and business-minded communications approach. And it all starts with your goals and objectives. Goals generally describe what you want to accomplish at a high level, and they do not need to be measurable. Objectives, on the other hand, are measurable, and they're measurable targets that, if achieved, will demonstrate your successful execution of the communications plan. They should also be clearly linked to your business need, pretty much like everything in your plan. As a judge, we're looking for outcome-based objectives that measure what your key audience will gain. And by outcome-based, we mean there was an impact to your audience's level of awareness or understanding. It changed their perceptions or behaviors, and so on. So since the number of social media impressions and reach, for example, doesn't provide any insight into the effect on the audience, they are not as effective targets for your objectives. These are output-based objectives, which will typically score in the 3.5 level at best. And it's okay to have some of them, but your objectives cannot rely solely on output-based objectives. And finally, you want to include SMART objectives, which really mean they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, relevant, and time-based. Now we move into the solution overview. So this section is essentially an executive summary of what you did to achieve your objectives. It should include a summary of your strategies and tactics and key messages. That one's often missed. And these should all link back to your objectives and the business need. This is where we really start to visualize what you did and how you put your strategic thinking to work. It's often helpful to reference your work samples directly in this section too, when it's applicable and where it's applicable. If you're submitting on a robust, multifaceted communications plan, we know it can be tough to summarize. So you may find the use of tables that are organized by objective or strategy to be a helpful approach here. And don't be afraid to use bullets as well. I'm moving on into implementation and challenges. So no communications program is without its challenges. And as communications professionals, we just have to roll with it, don't we? We have to persevere and often navigate through a variety of challenges, including tight deadlines, changes in directions, small, sometimes non-existent budgets, limited resources, and even some difficult or resistant personalities, just from time to time. By clearly articulating those challenges, however, you give the judges a line of sight to your project management skills. So give them the inside scoop. Lay out when it was tough and how you achieved great results despite those challenges. And more specifically, tell us how you used your budget, your time, and resources effectively. Demonstrate the collaboration you used with your key stakeholders. Talk about how you generated buy-in for your approach, and always link your thinking and approach back to the business need and what you're ultimately striving to accomplish. Now, measurement and evaluation. It's a love-hate relationship, isn't it? For all communicators, this measurement and evaluation bit. While it's not always easy, measuring your objectives demonstrates your project's success and tells the judges and your organization, in fact, that you did achieve what you set out to achieve. For this section, link directly back to your objectives. Tables will help with that too, and include your metric for each objective. And while output-based metrics are okay, it's the outcome-based ones that will measure the impact on your audience and will award you the highest score. Now for our work samples. So great samples highlight your great work quickly. While you can include up to 10 work samples, we suggest that you don't feel the need to prove you've done all the things, but rather choose samples that bring your campaign to life and help the judges visualize what you did. The most memorable samples I've judged are those that are visual and tell the story easily and through a fluid way and a simple approach. So consider developing a deck, for example, that can carry the judges through what you did with those visuals to support what you're saying. With some of the best I've seen, we'll show the objective, we'll talk about the key messages, then they'll show pictures of the social media campaign, of the product, and they'll just flow you through it. It's such a pleasure to look at those types of samples because you can take what you've read and then see it in action, and it's just super satisfying, and it really does wrap up the whole campaign. So when evaluating your work, the judges will be looking at a number of things, including, so we're still on work samples, stakeholder alignment and influence, alignment with objectives and strategies, professional execution, and overall quality, again, when looking at your work samples. And this is where IABC differs from other awards and competitions, whether it be in marketing or graphic design. To win innovation, there must be a strong connection between the work plan and the sample. The sample must be strategic and not just look great. We talked about that a little bit earlier. So the work sample should also represent all or most of the elements referred to in your work plan. If you cited it, include it in your 10 samples, up to 10 samples. And it should also be a logical, detailed presentation of the work. Now on to the final note on IABC's 7-point global scale of excellence. So every section of your work plan is judged on this 7-point scale that Sylvia discussed at the beginning. And the summary of your score for each of those areas I just reviewed with you will form your overall score. To achieve an award of merit, your submission will need to score between 5.25 and 5.74. To win an award of excellence, you'll need to score between 5.75 and 7. And really that summarizes and includes the high-level overview of this section. It's not easy, it's difficult to get into those higher scores, but once you really understand what you need to include in the thinking you need to initiate, even when you start any communication plan, it does start to get a little bit easier. Now I believe we're moving over to Cyrus.
Great. Thank you, Crystal and Sylvia, for sharing those great insights. And just doing a time check, Mandy, we're still running good, all is well?
We're good. Cyrus, thank you very much. Thanks for checking.
All right. Okay. Well, we're on the home stretch here. So now we're well on the way. Next few minutes, about 7 to 10 slides. And really, we want to cover 7 of the most must-know tips to help you ace that awards entry. So let's look at the first tip here. Pick the right project. Well, we all want to win an award, but it takes both time and money to enter. So we need to be strategic in our selection. So the $64 million question is, how do you determine which project or projects deserves an entry, deserves that time and commitment from you or your team and your client if you're a consultant? So here are a couple basics. Here are the ground rules. Make sure your entry abides by the IABC Code of Ethics, right? That's just a no-brainer. And also make sure you played, as the entrant, that you played a role in the project. If you haven't, someone else who actually has a role in that specific project needs to be the entrant person who actually puts in that entry. And then if you're a consultant, if the work is done for your client and on behalf of your client, you need to get that client permission letter. So those are just kind of the base level foundation stuff. A few extra things to consider here is, if you look at your project, your campaign, what have you, did you do great work? Did you make a significant impact? Would you consider it a best practice, the work that you did? And all of those are, definitely big check marks if you said yes to that, and kind of green light your way. Sometimes people think, well, maybe my project's too small, or maybe it's too big. And we see sometimes that in large projects that have multiple components, that you can actually break down a large project and chunk it down into individual entries in different areas. So for example, if you have a large project that includes a video or a newsletter, that video and newsletter could actually be taken out, separated, and entered as its own entry under a different division in the corresponding category. So, you can do it different ways. And if you have questions, by all means, reach out to IBC. And because really we're following the IBC Gold Quill and everything's aligned, you could even reach out to the hub or, simply IBC Toronto and get your questions answered there. And, another thing to consider, was it strategic? Do you have all, solid answers for all of those sections? So for example, the business need or opportunity, that first section in division 1 through 3. If you did a project because the CEO said so or the client said so, that's not going to earn great marks. We have to have some real tangible business needs. So you need to make sure, just in every section, do you have good, solid answers that are going to score high? And then, of course, the timeline, don't be disqualified. So ensure your project falls within the right timeline. And for these awards, in general, it needs to be implemented, published, and broadcast between January 28th and the day of submission. January 2018 and the day of submission. And sometimes this may actually be elongated if it was a long-term project and there was some research conducted beforehand. So if you're unsure of the timelines, again, if you don't get your question answered in this webinar, just check into IABC Toronto for the next one. Okay, so number 2, choose your category carefully. Really, does it fall into one of the divisions and categories? And if you're unsure, again, ask. Everyone's here to help. So we've got a couple new divisions and new categories, which I'll highlight again. But you basically select from 4 divisions, and then there are multiple categories within each of those divisions. So before you jump in and say, yes, that sounds like a fit, read all of the options, because there may be a better fit. Or there may be an opportunity where you can pull out part of your submission and enter it and recreate a new submission for another category. And maybe you're going to earn 2 awards. Who knows? Understand the requirements and how each division and category will be evaluated, because they each are evaluated differently. They each are going to ask you for different inputs. So just make sure you know the rules, even though you've entered in division 1 or 2, let's say, and you're going to enter in something into division 4. There are totally different rules for division 4, so you need to pay attention closely. And remember, the same project can be entered into several categories. But when you do that, and if you do that, you need to ensure that each entry is its own and you're not just copying and pasting, because the evaluators are looking for specific things in each entry because of the category and division. So if you just cut and paste, you may be missing things. And it's sad to see sometimes we know the project went well, but the way it was written up or the information that was missed is just not a winner in terms of an award. So just again, to highlight the new divisions, we've got communication research, communications training and education, and the categories, the new categories for 2020-21 are COVID-19 response and recovery, anti-racism, LGBTQ2, and accessibility. So moving on to number 3, don't underestimate the time it takes to create an entry. And if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter, said Blaise Pascal, right? The French philosopher and mathematician. And it's so true. We've got, for a few of the divisions, you've got 4 pages. And although that may seem a lot, when you actually look at what the evaluators are judging this entry on, you've got to cram in a lot of information. So, typically you're writing more and then paring back. And we all know editing takes time. And specifically, if it's your first time entering an award, please give yourself more time than necessary. You want to do this once, you want to do it right. Although some divisions may require more work than others, they all do require effort. And certainly fewer characters, like in division 4, it's 800 or 1,000 characters. And on first blush, that may seem, well, that's easy to whip off, but that just means absolutely every word has to deliver value. And that's tougher than having, multiple pages. So just give your entry the time it deserves. And really the goal is to be as descriptive as possible within those parameters. So, remember to make it easy for the judges by sharing all the information they need to give you a great evaluation and to score high, but not so much information to dilute your message or confuse the evaluators, because they're looking from the outside in. So they just want to understand the project completely, to tick off all the boxes to ensure they understand it, but don't throw everything in the kitchen sink, because that's, wasting space that could be used for something else. All right, so the next, number 4, get a proofreader. My personal motto is do it once, do it right. We do have to say proofreader, and yes, please use spell check, and that does happen sometimes, we see. But beyond the basics, there are books of past winning entries, and we've got them for many years. So that's a great place to start. But if you know a colleague who has submitted an entry before, why not ask them to do a little proofreading or mentor you along the way? Or even better, if you know someone who's earned an award before, could they take an hour to review and provide feedback? And of course, talking about timelines and submission, that's going to probably add a few days because you want to give that individual a few days. And then if they have substantial changes, you're going to need some time to re-edit and so forth. So all of this builds out your timeline. So, even do a mini critical path and just say, block that out. And suddenly you'll see, it would be great to have a couple weeks because things will pop up, right? And before you send it off, even for your internal review, if you can look at the same documents that the evaluators are going to use and rate your own work, just try that. Even if you're not reaching out to anyone, and all of those links, we're going to give you at the end here on one wonderful slide. So you have all the information at your fingertips. You just have to take the time to use it. So number 5. Remember, your award entry is an opportunity to gain feedback and measure your work to a global standard. So, everyone enters with the goal of earning an award. And IBC is all about pushing the communication profession forwards. And the awards program does this at an individual and team level. But the beauty is every entry is judged by 2 seasoned communication professionals who have gone through standardized training on how to evaluate submissions and provide really solid feedback to help you and your team become stronger at submitting more entries in the future, and if you haven't won. So even if you don't come out of this process with an award, you can always take away feedback and then resubmit that same submission. If you haven't won, you could resubmit the same submission using the feedback from the evaluators into next year, or maybe into another IABC award. So you're a winner either way by just receiving that feedback. And it's just a bonus if you actually come home with a little bit of hardware too. And number 6. So don't assume, make it easier on the judges. So as an evaluator, I mentioned we're looking in from the outside. So, your entry may land in an evaluator who's not an expert in your specific industry, or, doesn't have specific knowledge about your company or your audience. So you have to give them enough information to enable them to make strategic and informed decisions about your work. Judges want to see winners, but they can't make assumptions or guess or, kind of move the needle without having proof. So the advice is to use, all the room you have to include all the essentials to paint that full picture. And, one way to do this is just look at that evaluation rubric and determine what specific information you need for each section to score highly. And it's, it really is great if you can get a mentor or a partner to take a brief look and give them both the score sheet and your draft entry, and they can very easily pick out some of the things that it's, sometimes tough when you've been, working on it for a while. So, and just remember, you're writing the entry for 2 judges, and these 2 judges, they're volunteers. They're probably doing this in the evening or maybe on the weekend. So if you make it easy for them, not only will that allow them to move faster through your entry, but that will allow them extra time, more time to give you additional feedback. So it really is a win-win situation there. All right, coming up on the last slide here, and you may want to, there's a lot of writing, and typically I would not say, a ton of writing with 25 links is a great slide, but this is a beauty. Everything you need to know about creating a winning entry in any division. So if we've got division 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. We start off with the how-to guide, or if you've been around the block, you probably know this as the Midas touch. And that's exactly what to do to prepare a winning entry. That is worth its weight in gold. We've got samples of past winning entries. So even if you don't have the book of winning entries, you could just check out these couple of ones. You've got the work plan template. You've got the scoring sheet. So really, it's the exact same content that the evaluators are looking to evaluate your entry. And if you are a consultant, you've got that permission letter template. So that's a simple one to pop off and a must-have if you're actually an agency or a consultant doing work on behalf of another organization. And also a justification letter to help secure funding for the entry fee. So really, if you have any questions, I would definitely, have this slide and download all of this information. If you're looking at Division 3, download every one of those. Go to those links, download all of those documents, and then review those. And if you have questions, reach out to IBC Toronto. But this slide has really everything you need, and I think you'll be off to the races. So back to you, Mandy.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Cyrus, Crystal, and Sylvia. Even though I have judged before, I always take away something, and I learned something from all three of you. So thank you very much for that. I was scribbling away notes, so hopefully everybody on the line as well was able to take away a few nuggets. I will get to questions in a second. I just wanted to highlight some of the deadlines here because there are, as Sylvia has mentioned, we do have Gold Quill Awards, have dates and deadlines out there as well. So the Ovation Awards are here. So the early bird deadline coming up, I can't believe it's the 13th of January today already. So 22nd is the early bird deadline, and the prices for submission there reflect if you're keen and can get your submissions in early. The on-time deadline is next for February 12th, and then final February 26th is the final submission deadline there. So if you're a member, the prices are noted there, as well as a non-member. And why wouldn't you be an IABC member is the question I have to ask. All right, so those are the deadlines for submissions, and moving on to the next slide. Questions, but before we get into questions, sorry, I just wanted to put a call to action because I noticed there are several people on the line today, and we are accepting applications for judging as well. So not only award submissions, but for senior communicators who'd like to join the panel of esteemed judges. If you'd like to judge yourself, I can't tell you how much of a professional development and great education and learning experience this is, just from personal experience. Last year, I had the opportunity to evaluate both the Ovation and the Gold Quill, and it's an incredible experience, and what you take away and learn from these submissions on how to better communicate and plan and set your objectives. And as Crystal said, put your business plan first in all your internal communications. There's so many amazing things you can learn from the judging experience. So we are looking for judges to be IABC Toronto members in good standing, ideally 10 or more years of experience as a communication professional, and passion for continuing to develop professionally. That's another thing I mentioned. I know we're all in the virtual world these days, but the networking and the professional development just from being a judge is unbelievable. I can't say enough about it. So for more information, if you are interested in being a judge, there's information on the IABC Toronto website and an application there as well. So in conclusion for today, I'd like to take a moment to thank each of our panelists, Sylvia, Crystal, and Cyrus, for sharing their wisdom, insights, and experiences with us today. I think it was invaluable. As I said, I took away something from each one of them. They've shared some incredible resources, and as Cyrus said, we will be sharing those links with everybody and the presentation. I see that a question came up in the questions as well, so we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of that so that you have those very valuable links. And I just wanted to thank everybody for dialing in today. So before we go to questions, thank you for your time. This is it's a great year to be able to submit these awards. We have the extra categories, and a great time to be recognized for the many hours of communication contribution you have put into your company. So please, if you can submit an award, that's great. But if you can't, please sign up to be a judge. So I will now just look at some of the questions that have come in, but please feel free to keep the questions coming in. I'm going to look at the side panel. I think we've addressed a couple of them. The recording will definitely be up on the Toronto IABC site either later today or first thing tomorrow. So that will be there if people on your team were not able to join and you want to share, as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be shared with all of you as well. And I know one of the questions that came in, I think Katie addressed it, but it's a very good question. Because it's the timing for when the awards can be submitted. So it is quite a big time frame. So between January 2018 and the day of submission. So there is some time there. So if you've worked on something last year and you think it's too late, look at that, because there is a time if you want to go back to the previous year. And I can't see if there's anything else coming in. Katie, if you have anything, let me just look on the Q&A section here.
I see one.
Yes, I see. Will my submission automatically be enrolled for all awards? Does the fee include? No. So you do have to enter in your submission for each specific category. You have to select the category, and the fee, there is a separate fee to include those. So hopefully that answered that one. How long does it typically start to, you know what, I will defer this to Crystal, because this is a question. How long does it typically start to put together a submission? I'm thinking, you know, from start to finish. Crystal, are you able to share your experience there?
I can. It's been, I've had a variety of experiences. So if we have, now that we're much more experienced at this, we've done quite a few, and my team has won just over 10, I think, IABC, the Gold Quill or Ovation Awards over the last 3 years. We're getting quicker at it, but in the early days, if you're new to the submission time, I would give yourself 2 to 3 days, honestly, to tackle it. And so if you have a very robust communications plan that's solid, that has articulated your business need and has all the measurable objectives laid out and everything is there, it's easier. But if it's, you know, existing more in your head than is documented, it'll take you longer. So really do give yourself the time. I would start now, actually, if you have a jet, start now. And I think the judges and I we were discussing, or sorry, our panelists were talking about this whole process and how you do need time for it to percolate and sit and then go back to it. So I would start with a section and then go back to it and review it and then refine and then keep going all the way through. But really, you just need to continue with the underlying objective of having it connected to something that's meaningful and impactful, and you can demonstrate that all the way through. So yeah, start soon and give you a few days. And, you know, as Cyrus had mentioned, get somebody who you can trust to have a read of it, and then take the feedback. It will get easier, but the first time, it's a process. It certainly is a process.
Yeah, I would have to agree totally. And you took what I was going to say as well. Cyrus made some excellent points there about giving yourself the time, bake in the extra time if you are a first time doing this for the first time to submit it, because I think it's really valuable to go on the IABC site. There is a book of past winners, and it's just amazing to see some of the information on there from past winners that you can access. As well, to see like the amount of effort that they put in. I can't, for being a judge, Sylvia and I worked on this very closely last year. Some of the award nominations were amazing, but the areas that they fell short, they could have been, you know, a 6 or some of them like the highest merit areas, but they missed out on, you know, basic things that are in the rubric that are, you know, objectives and, you know, setting your business, just the points that we went through today. It really is valuable to take the time needed to go through and fill those in completely.
Yeah, that would be I think we're all really saying the same thing from our own experience of being entrants as well as evaluators, is How long does it take? More time than you think. And also being on the awards committee this year, I'm sure Ovation is exactly the same. Like 98% of the entries all come in on the last day.
Yes.
So, you know, we know that we're driven by deadlines, but really, given how much is in those rubrics, you're not going to, you know, you get mentally exhausted after a while, and you may miss things that you could easily have included. And so giving yourself, um, as Crystal mentioned, a few days so that you're able to come back and reread and double check, have someone else give you feedback, are all really valuable parts of the process. And if we really think of it as part of an investment in our own professional growth, if this is our opportunity to reflect on the work that we've done as well, then hopefully we can find that time that we're spending on the entries more meaningful.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Sylvia. There's a couple questions here. I think one was answered, but this is a good one. Deadline driven again. What is the timing due date on the deadline? Is it 11:59 p.m.? And yes, Katie answered that all deadlines are 11:59 p.m. Eastern time there. And then here's a question. I just want to confirm either Sylvia, Cyrus, or Crystal, if you know for sure, because I think the effort is made, but it says if you submit and the evaluators change your category as they feel it makes more sense elsewhere, are you notified when this change has been made?
I've never had to change a category, so I'll defer to Sylvia or Cyrus.
Okay.
That's a good question. And Cyrus, I don't know if you have the insight on this. As evaluators, if we ask to change or suggest a change of category, that's done in consultation with the organizer. So it's not something that's done lightly. At that point, though, there isn't normally time, I don't think, to go back and consult with the entrant to see if they are you know, in agreement with that change. The change would only be made in order to assist the entrant to have a better chance of being successful.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Sylvia. Yeah, we would defer if that has come up. We would defer that to the director of awards for that year. And as Sylvia said, it's only to assist, to help the entrant. But as we mentioned before, every category has slightly different parameters and are looking for different things, and you want to highlight different things. So it's, you know, if you think you've submitted it and the deadlines have not passed, check in with IABC Toronto and see what you can do at that stage. But really, when it's being evaluated, it really is out of your hands. You won't be, you know, you probably won't be given a heads up if things have changed. But it's if you're unsure, ask, you know, always ask questions as early as possible in the process, and that's always the best way to handle that. And I just want to just go back up to one question. It was, oh, let's see here. If you submit, maybe I'll answer that a bit later. No, it disappeared. Sorry. Okay.
Might
Over to
have
you,
put it in
Mary.
the answered category. Are you talking about the one where it's like
Oh yeah, from
all
yes.
awards?
Or what is the timing date? It's 11:59. Yes, that's the date. But just remember, you're uploading to a platform using this crazy thing called the internet. And just because you start uploading at 11:58 doesn't mean we're actually going to receive it by midnight. So please give yourself extra time. You know, we have had issues where the platform, you know, and I'm going back over a decade, but platforms have crashed, you know, local internet connections have been issues. So just try, you know, never wait to the last minute. That's all.
Yes, as we can attest to today, technology can be our friend, or can provide some challenges right before we're supposed to log into meetings. There's some great feedback in the chat that has come through from Maureen Healy and Janet, while also fabulous communicators. So Maureen is saying, don't normally change the category in the judging process. And both Maureen and Janet have emphasized the importance to make sure you're going through and selecting the right category when you're taking the time. So it goes back to the timing question. So and to Crystal's point, start now and just review the categories. And take the time to think about what category it should be in, so that we don't have to make these last minute switches. So I think if you prepare, review, take the time, you'll pick the right category, and we won't have to have any of these issues or questions at the last minute. And then there's a question that came through from I think Anthony Sharon. Will the winning entries be made published? The reason I ask is because there could be data metrics goals budget in the submission that may be internal information to the company. This is an excellent question. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there is the option when you're filling it out, put all the information in there. But when we're taking the award submissions for the book, there is the option when you're completing it to have that information removed. But correct me if I'm wrong.
You're correct, and I've had to use that functionality quite a few times. Actually, there's explicit permission you give IABC if you're an award winner to be published in those booklets. And sometimes it's appropriate to be included, sometimes it's not. So depending on the nature of the information and the sensitivity that they flagged, you may opt to not be included. And I think we probably check that box 50% of the time for our awards. We do a lot of organizational communications, stakeholder engagement, issues management type awards. And so it's not always appropriate to have it shared more broadly.
Yes, definitely some sensitive information for sure. So thank you for that question. That was a good question. Now this from Alice. Hi, Alice. Question for the judges. Now that you know what it takes to win an Ovation Award, do you now have the evaluation rubric in mind whenever you create communication strategies for your organizations? In this case, could you please talk more about this? That's an excellent point. And I think Crystal pretty much highlighted that with one of the ways that you go about in developing your communication. But Sylvia and Cyrus and Crystal, welcome your response to how this process has helped you with your day-to-day communications.
I'll jump in first. Alice is a great suggestion. The whole purpose, as Cyrus said, of this process is really to help move us forward professionally, to assist us in our professional growth. So those, like having those metrics out and looking at them when you are planning a new project is just going to inform excellent communication practice. And as I think we've all, and certainly get you started on, having all the documentation for making your submission easier at the end of the project.
Absolutely. I often, when I train on strategic communication plans, it's follow the gold quill outline. It's perfect, right? And in fact, we just had a call last night with the municipality who has a number of IABC members, and right at the beginning of a project, we said, we want to win a award of excellence for this. So what do we need to do to make that happen? And that's with, the consultants and the people internally on the call. So just look at, in terms of the process, I would just look at the different areas, starting with business need or the opportunity, and then even pull out the rubric. So you've got these 6 different areas, right? Business needs, stakeholders, objectives, smart objectives, solution overview, implementation, measurement. Look at those, and especially look at, right off the bat, look at business need, stakeholders, and your objectives. And if those objectives aren't smart and measurable, then you won't be able to do number 6. So look at those, 3 or 4 areas in this. You don't have to necessarily look at the solution overview at the early point in your planning, but look at those areas and say, okay, what are we missing, to get a score of 7, for example, or maybe a score of 6? Where are the holes right now in our planning phase? And what can we do to make sure we will have a solid answer for each of these? And that's just a plain great way to step your game up with any sort of implementation.
I 100% agree with that, Cyrus, and especially for those sections that we as communicators don't maybe necessarily instinctively go to or work with all the time. Strategies, objectives, goals, tactics, all of those things, that's just where that's in our sandbox all the time, but really focusing on the business need and challenging yourself to think critically about what value you are bringing by dedicating time and resources to advance this project on behalf of the organization or client has been, as I'd mentioned, transformational in my thinking, and will impact every communications plan and even conversation with our clients in terms of what we're trying to achieve for them. But also the stakeholder analysis, knowing that you're going to really have to define your understanding of the audience as part of your submission will challenge you to think differently about how you approach them. So, there's lots of great tools out there. Environics and Analytics is a good one where you can go to their website, plug in a postal code. If you're doing some community engagement, for example, they'll tell you insight about the demographics and some key, media habits that they have that can conclude those types of things. And then it'll also challenge you to think about, oh, right, I was going to do a totally digital campaign, but actually that doesn't lend itself well to the age 55 to 75 audience that prefers print, for example. So it can challenge you to think differently about your campaign, and then you can be much more effective because you've had to step back and take that second sober thought based on some of those things that are pushing you to think about that would not necessarily come to mind otherwise.
That's thank you, Crystal. That's excellent. And thank you, Cyrus and Sylvia as well. This next question, though, Crystal, kind of goes along the lines of what you were just getting to. I love the fact that you brought in the external website on Environics, because yes, that was a huge part in evaluating last year, that if people just went that extra bit further to provide more demographics and psychographics about their target audience, that would have helped move the needle a little bit more. So there's a question here right now from Matthew. It's a two-parter. What are your thoughts on adding benchmarks or industry standards? Any tips on this? And I'm thinking, Matthew, you must be talking about the judging or sorry, the awards submissions, like what's out there. As I know that if you look at the book on past winners, you're going to see some great examples there that you can benchmark. But I don't know if Crystal, if you have anything. And the second part of the question is also any websites you would recommend to find industry stats on digital channels. So I will open that up. Crystal, if you can start, and then maybe Cyrus and Sylvia can jump in.
It's an important question and a difficult one to answer. So yeah. I'll try my best. So should you include benchmarking insights? Is it helpful? It is. It is if you have them, if they're part of your work, your network, and you can get access to them, include them, because it can demonstrate that your plan is effective. So we do have to exercise a certain amount of judgment as judges to determine the impact and how effective your work sample is based on what we have in front of us. But what we don't know and what we can't do is go out and do research in terms like, oh, is that actually excellent based on what others in the public sector, private sector, not-for-profits achieve in this type of realm. We don't do that. So if you could do that for us, if you could cite those types of benchmarking examples, it's helpful. Where to get them? It would really depend on your network and the type of work you do for your organization or for your clients. So I can't give you a standard answer for that one, but maybe my colleagues can.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Crystal. Thanks for those insights there. It really depends where, what industry you're in. So I would look at industry associations. A number of them have information about their members and what they're doing and the benchmarks within there. There's a number of universities that put out reports and annual reports and consultants like, the Edelman Trust Barometer, universities like Ryerson in terms of digital channels. They put out a great report that is focused on Canada in terms of usage of different platforms. So, and there's a lot of US, like the Pew Research studies, they're excellent. And that's in the States. So, depending on what geographic markets you're looking at, but I would look at industry associations, universities, and kind of these annual reports. And even Hootsuite, about a month ago or so, launched their annual report. Talkwalker has another great social report. So there's a lot of, and in fact, we have a social media trends presentation that comes up with a lot of this information too. So I would look at those kind of industry associations, universities, and these reports that are sometimes done by large social media channels like Hootsuite and so forth.
And if I can just add to that, and actually it's really interesting because I've just for a course, I've just done a benchmarking study, and it's going to inform a lot of different projects that I'm working on. So I would add to that. I mean, definitely industry associations or professional associations can be a good source for those industry benchmarks, because definitely you can see that the benchmarks can be quite different from one industry or sector to another. The other thing, another way to go is, particularly in nonprofit or government, is similar organizations. So the benchmarking study that I did was with some other similar nonprofits, where if you have a relationship and you, sign a confidentiality agreement or whatever is needed, you can share data between organizations that's of mutual benefit. Larger organizations might have internal benchmarks. So the benchmarks don't always have to be external. They could also be internal if we're talking about like a large corporation. So, don't forget about the internal benchmarks that might be useful. And then finally, I would remind people, we often think of benchmarks as just numbers and quantitative, but we can also do qualitative benchmarks. And so, that's another opportunity to bring in some benchmarking. Even if it's not hard numbers, there might be some qualitative benchmarking that can be included.
Excellent point. Thank you very much, Sylvia, and Crystal and Cyrus. Those were all excellent. Thank you very much. I think as you have the most experience with the next question, Sylvia, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. Do not-for-profits who may not have the budget for things like environics and deep audience analysis stand a chance? Do judges look at budget closely in these cases?
Yeah, so that is such a great question. I think not only for nonprofits, there's lots of organizations or projects that might not have a big budget. And so the fact that you don't have a big budget doesn't mean you can't do research. So I think we've just highlighted some of the things. There's lots of secondary research that's available. We've just been talking about benchmarking that is available through industries. If you're particularly in the not-for-profit, there is a lot of benchmarking available through the Canadian Society for Association Executives. They have a benchmarking report that you can buy for like $20, $30. So that's a great resource right there from their website bookstore. I also talked about in the nonprofit sector, we tend to be very open to sharing information. So you can do some benchmarking as well. Not all of the research that matters is a big Gallup style survey. Research can be informal. It can be qualitative as well as quantitative. So there are a lot of different strategies. It doesn't have to be a survey. It could be interviews with some proxies for your audience. It could be, tracking calls that come in. One of the places I would start is by looking at the information that your organization is already gathering in some form or another and analyzing that. So definitely evaluators do look at the budget that the project had available to it. But simply saying that you didn't have a budget for research will not excuse the lack of research. So we believe that regardless of the budget, there is a way to do research or to bring in insights that will demonstrate the connection of your project to your business goals and to your audience insights.
I would add
That,
as well that really the best way to win awards, and I think really approach any sort of submission this way, is what strategic value did you bring? And so you can do that on a shoestring budget, you can do that on a large budget. It will look different, it'll be experienced differently, but that fundamentally is what wins awards. So again, to Sylvia's point, there's stuff you can find. You can get anecdotal research. You can, do a little informal free survey. There's things you can do to get those insights. The Environics analytics that I had mentioned, anybody can pull it up and plug in a postal code, generally speaking, and get some insight. And now to get the more robust reports, then yeah, it's usually there's a membership fee there, but there's access to that type of information without cost. But really, if you can nail the business need and come up with some strong strategic objectives and deliver excellent communications, budget will not stop you. It just won't be quite as flashy of a campaign, and that's okay. Really, it is that strategic value and the impact that you've had to your organization that make it a standout submission.
yeah, those are great points. And really, the judges are looking at budget, but they're looking at how the budget was used.
Yeah.
So if you ask yourself, did I use my budget effectively? Regardless of if it's a small budget or a big budget, that's the question you need. Because when we see large budgets and it looks like things have not been managed properly, that actually goes against that entrant. So, you really have to look at, was my budget, whatever that happens to be, used effectively? And, and even better, was there innovative use of resources, right? Were you creative to get over those hurdles of whether it is lack of something else or lack of budget? So basically, the evaluators are looking to see your strategic approach, and that could be actually in part of your work plan is how you overcame the challenge of little budget by doing X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you very much to all of the panelists for your very insightful feedback and responses to the questions. I think we have time for this one final one. And when I read it, I thought, oh, okay, that's just, X. But I read it again and I thought, okay, there's this kind of two parts here. So this is from Millie. Apologies if this was mentioned already, but who do we reach out to if we're unsure about the category the entry should go into? And at first I thought, oh, okay, I'll just give them the slide deck. But I think to back up to that, I think it addresses the topic that was discussed earlier about making sure you take the time, review the information to know where your entry should go. And it could actually go into, two different categories. I think maybe look at some of the past ones submitted and use your mentor who you're, working with, ask them to review it, get their thoughts, look at the rubric. But, it could be such a great nomination that it would actually fit into more than one category. So I think take the time, review it, fill out the business reason and go through that process. And then you're going to, I think your answer to your question will be addressed, but I will leave this or I'll defer to the panelists to see if they have some recommendations as well. But it will be to answer that, we will be providing the contacts on the PowerPoint presentation as well that provides more information and feedback.
We struggle with that a lot, actually. So we do a lot of internal communications, employee engagement. Is it, philanthropy? Is it communications? So you do have to go through that process and read through, to your point about the various sections and what little nuances, what changes in terms of evaluation that might lend itself to showcasing your work in a more fulsome way. So really that's what it comes down to in terms of who to call. It's a tough one because nobody else is as intimately familiar with your work than you. So I would basically take a look, roll it up into a couple of key categories, look at the rubric, and then you're not really going to go wrong, but you could go more right. So I would basically just think about it that way and just do your due diligence to sort of take a look at those rubrics.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Crystal. And I wanted just, we are at our time now. So I just wanted to thank once again our fabulous panelists today, Sylvia, Crystal, and Cyrus. We extremely appreciate your time and your insights and your expertise so much. As I said, the recording will be shared as well as the PowerPoint presentation. And we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today and wish you all the best in your award submission. And if you're not ready for the award submission, please join us as an evaluator. It's an incredible learning experience. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.